Welcome to Bottles and Bites Without Borders, where every sip and every bite tell a story. Rob is your host. Each week, he will take you on a delicious journey, from vineyard tales and distillery secrets to culinary traditions. So, grab a favorite drink, a plate of something tasty, and join us for another adventure with Bottles and Bites.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks so much for stopping by. We've got a fun conversation today. Good friend of mine, Travis Thompson, a wine professional, a casual wine drinker. I don't want to put too much pressure on you, Travis. Welcome to the show, man. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Rob. Let's be careful with the word professional.
Yeah, I mean, we sling wine, or you sling wine, we drink wine, and we enjoy wine. We drink a lot of wine. I mean, that's got to matter. It's got to count for something.
Yeah, hopefully I don't spill it, just spill it into my
Unless
glass.
it's down your throat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Hey, today you've come out. We're going to have a fun conversation. We're going to talk about wine and try to take the snobbiness away a little bit more. And we're going to jump into that in just a second. But I do want to start by saying thank you to everybody who listens to the podcast. We appreciate it everywhere around the globe. It means a lot. Helps us a bunch. If you can continue to listen, share the podcast, and like it. Wherever you listen on Spotify, Google, YouTube, wherever, giving us a like, giving us a review goes a long, long way. And by the way, talking about YouTube podcasts, this is a video podcast now, so we do both, the audio and the video. If you want to go to the YouTube channel and check us out, you can do that as well at Bottles and Bites on YouTube. And I will say we would do some other things. You and I just did a blind on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, but I remember, back whenever I worked, an inside sales job, and I had, YouTube videos playing in the background. And this is something you could just, play as a YouTube video in the background as an open tab and just listen. But, hit like in the meantime, just so that you can make sure and hear what Rob's doing, lately.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. And what are we doing today? Well, we're going to talk about wine, and we're going to blow the doors off the idea that wine only works with steak or cheese or fancy dinners. We're going to show you that, or talk about and discuss, give you our opinions, that wine goes with everything, from tacos to takeout, from sushi to spicy wings. We're making the case that wine goes with everything.
Can you pair wine with hot dogs?
Yes, you can.
Let's see.
Yeah, we're going to find out, aren't we? So let's talk about a few things. Let's talk about some outdated perceptions. Wine is only for well, let's back up a little bit. Let's start here. When did wine become this thing? I think people think that wine, because it's been made for thousands of years, wine was always paired with food. Wine from places like Greece and Rome and Italy and places in Spain or France, that wine was always had to be with food. And that wasn't the case. You know this, right? I know you do.
I do, yeah.
So this came about in the 1980s is when wine really started becoming, hey, this kind of complements, it kind of goes with and helps when we talk about food and wine. Before that, let's be honest, wine's an alcohol. This was something that you drank for effect. It may be a lower in alcohol than a whiskey or something like that, but it still had alcohol.
Well, let's be real. as much as I try and talk about how certain producers that I represent have been making wine for 400 or 500, 600 years, those first 300 or 400 years, they were making wine for the people that were within a mile outside of their front gates.
Yes, exactly right.
But in the past 60 or 80 years, these people that are in Chianti Classico or in Bordeaux, they've been making wine for people in Houston, Texas, and Miami, Florida, and random town in Illinois or whatever, to where it's actually making it to their bottle shop, their Specs, their Sprouts, or whatever their local distributor of the spirits and wines that we drink. But this conversation has just become relevant in the past, I'd say 60 to 80 years.
No, I agree 100%. And by the way, let me shed a little light on Travis. You've been on the show before, but those who haven't heard you on the show before need to know that you're in the profession. You work for a wine importer. Wine is something, as I said early on, we both enjoy. We drink a lot of. But tell everybody kind of what your journey is in wine, kind of how you got into this as we talk about wine.
Well, yeah, so not to blow smoke up Rob's rear end, but, probably, God, have we known each other
Since 6 years?
6, 7 years.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe a year to 18 months before COVID, we had a bottle share and dinner at Rob's house, and some other, mutual friends of ours were all hanging out at Rob's house, and we had a lot of really good wine on the table, and me and my wife brought some wine that we were proud of at the time, but there was a couple of bottles, and one of them was some somewhat back vintaged. What was the bottle? It was actually an Argentinian wine from a fairly large producer.
Catena?
It was Nicholas Catena Zapata. It was a 2014 vintage, and I don't know if that was my actual turning point, but that was one of them that said, man, if you spend more than, I don't know, 25, 30 bucks, you can get some really good wine. And so from then, I decided to start educating myself, and I chose to go down the WSET route. And then just, life happened, and I ended up working in the industry because, the specifics don't matter, but somebody was like, hey, you want to work in wine? I know somebody hiring. And from there, it started happening. And so I got WSET 1, WSET 2, kind of thinking about 3, but I've got another baby on the way due in July, so it's hard to really.
Life's happening.
Life is happening, so it's hard to really say when I'm going to get that level 3. But I love the idea of continuing education, and I'm always going to stay learning through drinking, and I appreciate you having me on, and learning through. Blind tasting and eating and drinking is always the best way to learn.
I think you bring up a great point. I've heard that before. I don't say it enough. I don't remember to say it enough. Learning through drinking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best way to explore wine is through drinking wine. And, I have friends that just, I like this wine. I like this region. That's all I drink. And I'm like, man, you're missing out on so much great wine from around the world. So,
yeah, I mean, just imagine that the situation is that, you're, and whatever, friend environment, you're all sharing a big plate of nachos that just came out of the oven, and somebody's like, hey, anybody got a beer, a glass of water, a cup of Kool-Aid, and you're like, and your buddy's like, well, I got a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. You want a glass?
Yeah.
And you're like, sure, I'll get a glass of that while I devour these nachos. But you never thought about it. You're just like, I just need something to drink.
Yeah.
And then as you're eating these jalapeno and cheese covered ground beef on a tortilla chip, you're like, oh, maybe this works.
Kind of helps me a little bit.
Yeah, I like this.
I mean, if we think about food in general, you always need something to wash it down, right?
But it's like, if the bottle on the table happens to be great, it doesn't have to be the perfect pairing of acid, tannin, body, structure.
Don't overthink
alcohol, all these words. Maybe it's just good wine and good food.
Yep.
And I think that's really important. We need to drive home in the next 30 minutes.
Yeah. Before we get started down this kind of the world of wine and why it goes with everything, we got some wine in the glass that you poured for us. That this is a unique kind of wine, unique in the sense that it's from a region that's not known for this grape.
Yeah, no, this is it's a fresh vintage, so a 2023 Saint Brie, and within Saint Brie, we're always going to be drinking Sauvignon Blanc. So Saint Brie is an AOC within Chablis. That is always going to be Sauvignon Blanc. It is the only AOC within France that is going to be making.
But when you think Chablis, it's part of Burgundy.
Yeah, exactly.
When you think Burgundy, you're thinking Chardonnay.
Exactly.
Very rarely does in your mind go Burgundy Sauvignon Blanc. That's where this is unique and different.
Exactly. Yeah. You think of white Burgundy, you're thinking Chablis. Well, within the region of Chablis is this little tiny town of Saint Brie, and in Saint Brie they're making Sauvignon Blanc.
Yep. And I will say this: if you can find something from this region where you are, find it, because everything you think about Sauvignon Blanc is going to be the complete opposite with this wine.
Yes, I mean, if you're over in, obviously New Zealand, or even as Napa, or even northern Italy, in Alto Adige, they make some beautiful Sauvignon Blanc, but it's still going to have some of those greenish characteristics. Over in New Zealand, it's going to be big green characteristics, like the pyrazines of the green bell pepper skin. But here in Chablis or in Saint Brie, it's this is very even keeled. It's just a beautifully balanced wine. The acid and the fruit, like it's And I was happy to get Rob to miss on the blind that we did earlier, but not a whole lot of people would guess this on a blind.
I don't think so. I think you tricked me up on this one. This was a good play, but a sneaky play by Travis. We just recently, today, go check it out here in the next week. We did a little blind where you brought a white and a red. I brought a white and a red, or opened a white and a red, and we're at my house. And blinded each other on these, and that was fun. But yeah, never would have thought this was I think I said it in the video. Spoiler alert. No way this is a Sauvignon Blanc.
Actually, I think you did that on both of my wines. There's no way this is a South American wine. Yeah, there's no way this is Sauvignon Blanc.
Doesn't get South American to me. Yeah, but anyway, spoiler alert. Go check out the video. It was fun to do that with you, Travis. All right, back to today's show. Wine goes with everything. I think too many times people have this thought. There's these myths that if you're going to open a bottle of wine, you got to have a fancy dinner.
No.
If you're going to have red meat, you got to have a red wine. If you're going to have fish, you got to have a white wine. All these kind of things that became rules, which to me, they shouldn't be rules, or I would say it this way. Rules are just guidelines. Rules are not black and white. Rules are always gray. There's room to move within that to find what you like.
Yeah, Rob, today the Masters are on.
I know.
What if we've got a bowl of popcorn or a bowl of peanut butter pretzels or just
something salty like that? I want to go with champagne or something with some bubbles, maybe a Cremant or Cava.
Just all those white wines flow to your mind. But you've got, I don't know if you've got a can of canned cheese or salsa and whatever. You don't ever have to just, silo it to, we're having charcuterie, so we have to have these, or we're having, steak and fries, so we're going to have this. But the thing that we want to convey in the next 30 to 40 minutes is, you're watching football, you're watching baseball, you've got some stuff on the TV, you're gathering some people around the back patio. What are we snacking on? Do we always have to pull out a 6-pack of beer, or can we have a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc from Saint Brie in France?
Well, and I think to kind of summarize to your point, there's not a food you can't find a wine to go with it.
Exactly.
That's kind of the point of this. And that's where we want to start, because I think there's, I always hear wine professionals, Travis, not necessarily importers like you, but people who serve wine at a restaurant or everything, or people who are the face of wine, whether it be through a brand or whatever, always saying we want to take the snobbery away from wine. We want more people to enjoy wine. But I don't see them doing a whole lot to encourage that. I don't see a whole lot of, hey, let's do a wine dinner where, to the point of this episode, we're going to have a cheeseburger, some tacos, a couple slices of pizza, and we're going to show you wines that go with these call them casual foods, and show you how versatile wine can be with everything. Wine doesn't have to be this snobby, high class, only if you have money kind of beverage that do you enjoy this.
Yeah.
It really goes with everything, but nobody ever does it. They never do it.
There's a local restaurant that I've talked about with you that, maybe 4 or 5 months ago did a wine dinner that I thought it was really cool. They called it a highbrow, lowbrow wine dinner.
Okay.
And it was so that they did everything from foie gras to corn dogs to cheeseburger, or they did sliders, so a little even more casual than even a smash burger. And then, I don't remember the full range of food, but the idea was, so they had everything from Miller, like the Yellow Belly, like Coors beer, to a Boda box, wine in a box. They had true, like...
Are you talking Coors, the banquet of beers?
Yes, I am.
Oh, that's classy. That's the champagne of beers.
It is. But then they also had, like, Premier Cru Chablis. They had, big badass wine, and they had, kind of lower tier box wine and, light, the banquet of beers of Coors. And so it was a really cool way just to, be silly, but also present and say, hey, you can have a Coors Light with a corn dog, or you can also have a Maltman level Chablis.
Yeah. I think, kind of piggybacking off of what you're talking about, a lot of people think that you have to be specific with wine when you pair it. If I'm going to have this kind of food, I need to have a Pinot Noir. If I'm going to have a steak, a ribeye, it has to be a Napa Cab. That's not necessarily true. It's not completely false that you can't have that. You can, but there's a lot of wines that would be just fine and be absolutely fantastic. A Rhone, sure. GSM would be great. A Barolo with a steak would be absolutely fantastic. So there's a lot. But my point in saying this is it's more of a general rule. You want the intensity of the flavors of your food to match the intensity of what you get in that wine. You want to make sure they marry up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like I've got a neighbor on my block that I just met. We were both playing with our kids at the park, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm a Napa Cab drinker." And I was like, "All right, cool." And in my head, I see this as an opportunity because I'm like, oh, I can show him about the Bordeaux blends of Italy or the Bordeaux blends of Bordeaux.
Yeah,
and just like, hey, let me show you anything outside of a Napa Cab. And it's not because I have anything against Napa at all. I mean, my company is slowly integrating more and more Napa wines in our portfolio. But at the same time, I just want to show this person that, hey, walk the aisle just over at, Specs or your bottle shop, whether it's Vinology or Padres or wherever you are in Italy, France, or around the world. Take that, one step to the right or one step to the left and go look in France or Spain or Italy and see, hey, what else could I be drinking that's somewhat affiliated or like, all right, my baseline is Napa Cab. What else should I be drinking if I don't want to drink the same 12 wines all the time?
Yep.
So, I mean, all right, so if you're starting at Napa Cab, what does a Napa Carmenere taste like? What does a Napa Cab Franc taste like? And then start saying, all right, well, what does a, Left Bank Bordeaux taste like? What does a Cabernet from Chile taste like? And then, start stepping left and right and see what tastes good to you.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing is, do you like the wine? Does it taste good?
Yeah.
Do you enjoy it? Quality, also, 1A, 1B, quality, and do you like it? That's really the most important things. And then if you do like it, do a little homework. Go dig a little bit, do a little research, find out who makes this, what do I like about it, make some notes, and keep track of that so that you're drinking more wines in a style that you enjoy. But talking about pairing foods and wine and everything goes together, we talk about where did this come from? It really, wine's been around for thousands of years. If you go back to Georgia and some of these countries, 8,000 years ago, they've been drinking wine. It wasn't until the 1980s that wine and food pairings really became a thing, where it was studied and kind of scientifically kind of analyzed to go, wait, how do these things really work together and enhance one another? And I think that's a really good thing. But I think back to the snobbery of winery, what it's been for the longest time, all of these wines, when they did this research, was these really badass nice wines with badass nice food, which is fine. But simple wines have some of the same similar characteristics and, scientific, parts to it. Same with the foods. Simpler foods have the same characteristics, so you can still pair them together and get a similar result that's going to be pleasing to you, that you're going to enjoy and you're going to want to continue to have and take part of.
Yeah, but so with my Thin Mint cookie from the Girl Scouts, should I be drinking a Zinfandel or a Cabernet?
I don't know. It's up to you. I mean, you throw me off with the mint because I'm going, I don't know that I want either one of those wines with mint, but do you? Do you like a wine with that?
Oh, I've seen it, a couple of wine bars here in the past couple of years trying to be creative and doing Girl Scout cookies and wine pairings. And I'll be honest, I've contributed. I've been the guy on the other side of the table saying, yeah, let me pair that Zinfandel with a caramel cookie or whatever. Yeah. Some Sauvignon Blanc with a pecan praline sandy, whatever they call it.
Well, let's talk about everyday pairings.
Sure.
Things that some people might not even think about. And, for me and you being into, I'll call us wine nerds, wine geeks, these just make sense. But a lot of people go, never would have thought of that. Fried chicken. I say fried chicken. Travis, you're going to say?
Champagne.
And by the way, a lot of people think champagne is this celebratory drink. And by the way, it doesn't go with wedding cake. It's horrible with wedding cake. But champagne in general, one of the greatest food wines you can have. but with fried foods, absolutely fantastic. And fried chicken and champagne, classic pairing.
Yeah, and I would even break that down a little bit to say that brut cava, a dry prosecco, a brut Franciacorta. I mean, if you
Cremant from Alsace.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to spend $48 on this bottle of wine to have with your fried chicken. If you want some bubbles to go with your fried chicken, you can get a dry prosecco for $18-20. It's going to be great.
Yeah. I'd probably go Cremant before I go Prosecco.
Sure. But I mean, I'm just saying there's different options than just, true champagne.
The only reason I'm saying that is, one, I might stay with the similar grapes,
Sure.
And the same method of making it.
Yeah, but I mean, so much of what I want to deliver the next, 30 minutes to the people is options.
Sure.
I mean, let's pizza, hot dogs, nachos, whatever we're talking about, it doesn't have to be just Bud Light. Let's talk about options.
Well, cheeseburger.
Oh.
You and I made a smash burger for lunch before recording this. We had a couple of wines that we had open, which one was a ripe Bordeaux, one was a Cabernet Sauvignon from Chile. Both fantastic with a burger.
Yeah, I was in kind of a red wine drinker's heaven. I mean, that was caramelized onion, cheddar cheese, bacon. But we were kind of bouncing back between the two red wines, and I was really happy.
But when you think cheeseburger, okay, that's two that you've mentioned, this Bordeaux type of blend. You could do, Napa Valley cabs. Because you got this greasy, fatty, when we talk about steaks and stuff. But you could also go a GSM blend. You could go a Zinfandel. Hell, you might even go a Rioja Tempranillo. Could be good.
All right, so like a New York strip or a smash burger, what's a white wine that we could do?
Well,
I mean, this is where I run into a little bit of a challenge, but I mean, I think that we get back, way back on that red throttle and maybe introduce a rosé, maybe introduce a Riesling.
See, if I'm going to go rosé for something like that, I'm going to go with a Tavel that has some skin
Tavel or
contact,
maybe Bandol.
Body. Yeah,
maybe like a more Vedra rosé. Yeah. The white is where I struggle a little bit, but in the broader context of just introducing a wine with whatever you're eating. We've got, four big categories. We've got bubbles, white, rosé, and red.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're just trying to not drink, beer or or a spirit, you've got those other four categories to choose from.
Well, and the other thing I would say is, not every wine goes with every food, and it's not meant to. So when you ask me what white wine would you drink with a cheeseburger, that's a tough one. I don't know if there's a lot that I'm going to think of right off the top of my head. Given some time, could you really, find something? But yeah, it's not going to probably be on the shelf that's readily available. Maybe it is. But I think there's just things that make sense, and red wine and a cheeseburger makes sense. If I have fish tacos, I'm probably going to look at more options in the white wine category than I am in the red. Can you find a red that might work? Maybe, but I'm still going to, there's way more like this white options for me.
Yeah, I'm for sure. Like you put some, fish tacos, a little bit of ceviche. I'm definitely going to be wanting, Sauvignon Blanc. I'm definitely going to be wanting maybe Picpoul. I'm definitely going to be wanting Pinot Grigio. And we back up to the steak and hamburger conversation. Champagne.
Yeah.
The acidity and the bubbles kind of help champagne go with a lot of foods. Or
the effervescence of that kind of cleanses the palate, the acidity. You're exactly right.
I mean, high acid sparkling white wine is going to go with it, or even a rosé version of that is going to go with a lot of different food. It almost becomes this, universal pairing, and champagne is known as a universal pairing.
That's a great point. Champagne's, if you're not sure, pop some champagne.
Never
you're probably good. Yeah.
Hey, Rob. So we're doing an appetizer for a dinner, and say my wife brings over a chopped salad or a grilled chicken Caesar. You're treating us as blind guests. We don't know what you're making, so we're going to bring a Caesar salad. What wine would you put on the table?
A Caesar salad with a Caesar dressing. I might go Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah,
with the acidity, the crispness that might cut through the richness of that dressing. Still goes well with the chicken. If you're having
I think
Caesar.
My just instant gut reaction, shoot from the hip, would be Gruner Veltliner.
You do Gruner as well.
I mean, I think just and I think that would be with a lot of different, types of salad. I think whether it's a Cobb salad, a Caesar salad, a kale salad, or whatever, that the higher acid of those leaves, the higher acid of the dressing, vinaigrette, whatever it is, I think Gruner and Sauvignon Blanc share a lot of good characteristics of, higher acid, similar stone fruit, citrus characteristics. I think those could go off one of those
absolutely
salad types. But the point I want to drive home is that, like, people think salad. I don't. Is there a wine for salad? Yes, there is.
You bring up a good point though, because I think taking it from the food category of salad to the wine of white wine to me, Travis, you tell me if you think differently. To me, is the greater wine to go with food than red wine, meaning it's more versatile. Not that it's necessarily the best pairing with certain dishes. Red wine has its place for certain types of foods. But when you think about the broad range of foods that you're going to eat, white wine is going to pair up better in most of those instances than a red wine.
Yeah, whenever I have the opportunity to place a wine in a restaurant and get that wine on a given restaurant's menu, and I'm doing some staff training, the phrase that I use a lot of times with say a group of 6, 7, 8, 10 servers is like, hey, this wine will pair with everything south of a steak. So yeah, there is a place for red wine with a well marbled New York strip, filet, ribeye, whatever. However, if we're talking about grilled chicken, a seared pork chop, a sous vide pork chop, or however your seafood, shrimp, whatever, this and that, but everything south, and I just mean south, everything less red meaty than a steak. Let's look at this Lugana. Let's look at this Sauvignon Blanc. Let's look at this Pinot Grigio. Let's look at this Gamay. Like anything that's just not the most ideal steak pairing. Let's talk about this other wine that I'm showing you right now. And so, that's it's just a phrase that I use often with, a little staff training is everything south of steak, this wine would work.
Yeah, totally agree. I think another category that people sometimes get like, well, there's not a wine that goes with this, is the spicy food category.
Ooh, good point.
And that's where I think people are misinformed or not as educated as they should be. That's not a derogatory comment. It's just that you don't know what you don't know. And again, we've made the comment earlier in the podcast that there's not a food you can't find a wine to go with it. And spicy foods, whether it be a Thai food, whether it be an Indian food, whether it be spicy wings, there's a wine that goes with that.
Or even just a plate of nachos covered in jalapenos.
That too. Yep. And, when I think spicy, and my wife and I love Asian food, if we're going to go Asian spicy, we usually go a Riesling with some residual sugar, because the residual sugar is going to help with the spice. And that's where those kind of wines come in really handy.
Yeah. And maybe into a different podcast, we could get down into the nitty gritty of why, fat pairs with tannin and spice pairs with, sugar and acid.
Yeah, we're going to keep this at 1,000 feet.
Yeah, let's keep this higher level. And I just want, in the next, however long, I want guests or audience members to realize, hey, there's a wine for everything. Yeah. And that's the point here. But if we were, in a later episode, we'll get into, chemically, why does this work? Or, maybe that's something you can find somewhere else. But right now, we just want to tell you that, hey, there's a way to do this. And we don't want you to ever think that, within our wine world, that you're out of options.
Because, yeah, absolutely. And another category I'll throw out is pizza night. And I know in America, you and I are wine guys. So I think that if we say, hey, Travis, come over for a pizza night, we're going wine right away. But I think most of America is probably going, you drink beer with pizza. You don't have wine with pizza. You drink beer. You can. There's nothing wrong with that. I would disagree that it's the better pairing with pizza. But with pizza, a lot of people go, okay, well, if you're going to have pizza, it's like a high acid because you have this tomato sauce, but you do have some fat with the cheese, and depending on what meats you put on. I mean, you can go a lot of different ways with pizza. You can go a Chianti. You can go a Lambrusco. You can go a Pinot Noir. My favorite pizza wine with some kind of red sauce on it is a Barbera d'Asti. I love Barbera.
Yeah, that's a pretty universal pizza wine. And it's going to be slightly lower in the acidity level, but then if you bring up maybe like a true Chianti Classico, Sure. Going to be a little bit more medium plus acid. So that's going to be your, I would say, a little bit more universal of a pizza wine, because it's going to be, if you've got pepperoni, you've got maybe just a cheese and sauce kind of pizza. Just your.
How about this? A white pizza with a Chablis.
Oh yeah, or one of our Northern Italy whites.
Yeah.
If you want to be Verdicchio or Vermentino or Arnese or Suave. There's a lot of they're just getting the point out there. There's some beautiful white wine in Northern Italy.
By the way, we just both poured a little Suave Classico into our glass. This is 100% Garganega, and a delicious wine.
Rob, have you ever had a sparkling Garganega?
I have not.
And I've seen at least one good one out there at a local wine bar, and man, it is a really unique offering.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. All right, let's jump into, we're talking coming from the perspective of us here in the States.
The average wine drinker.
Well, not just average, but here where we're at. And I get that. People listen to this podcast all over the globe. So we can talk about some foods and wine pairings that you might get around the globe. Let's just think Argentina with a savory empanada goes. Because, there's an empanada, an Argentinian empanada place here in Houston/Katy called Marini's that we absolutely love. And getting some savory empanadas, they make some great dessert empanadas as well. But having wine when we get these are fantastic. So my point in saying this is there's foods from around the globe that all have this kind of, call it casual type food that wine can go with. It's not just here in the States.
Yeah, but yesterday I was at a local chain restaurant, and I was having a burger, and I saw some other things on the menu, like a pulled pork sandwich. And I was like, man, I know Rob and I have this podcast coming up, what wine would pair with these things? And, when we talk about, the heart of casual food, I think that's really where, I came up with this topic is people walk up and they look at a menu, whether it's just your steakhouse, your chain bar and grill, ice house, whatever you want to call it. We're looking at, beef or chicken tacos. We're looking at, a grilled chicken sandwich. We're looking at, or even a spicy chicken sandwich. That's where I think. So let's back off to chopped beef or a pulled pork sandwich. What would you do?
For both of those?
Yeah, sure.
Zinfandel.
Ooh, good all coverage wine.
Yeah, it's just going to go. I love a good Zen.
Yeah, I think Zen.
And by the way, for people who don't know, it's not white; it's red. Napa made white Zinfandel popular, but it's a red grape.
Yeah, but I think for there, backing off to a white, I think you could do again bubbles. Bubbles is kind of helps.
Bubbles
things
is safe.
Yeah, bubbles makes things universal. Especially if you're going to go dry. Do a brut cava, brut prosecco, brut champagne. But I think for that, I think you could even do a nice Chablis or Chardonnay with a spicy
enough acid that sure.
And any of those things, whether it's kind of a Carolina style pulled pork, spicy chicken sandwich, any of those things. I think the acid's going to bring down the heat.
And by the way, when we're talking about this, the whole point in kind of pairing foods with wines is to complement each other.
Yeah.
And you want the wine to, you want to take a bite of food and then have a drink of that wine and it tastes better. Then you want to have a drink of wine, take a bite of that food and the food tastes better. That's the whole point. And scientifically this works. And there's wines that work better with certain types of foods. And that's kind of what we're talking about here today. But it doesn't all have to be, Michelin star type of food. There are great foods. To me, my favorite foods are the simplest foods. And if you think about the cuisines around the world, most of the most famous foods from places around the world are the peasant food. What they ate because it's what they had in their region and what they can make with what was there. And now it's, people take that and then elevate it however they do, but it still comes back to its core of being a very simple type of food.
Yeah, and that's what we did in your backyard just an hour ago was, everybody has made, a smash burger, hamburger, double stack burger, chili burger, green chili burger. But for us today, we just did a very simple smash burger, double decker with a little bit of cheddar cheese and some accoutrements.
Now, I will say that the cheese was Kraft American, which is the best burger cheese for a
It
smash
is.
burger.
It is. We had basically just called a right bank Bordeaux, which is heavy Merlot, and then a Chilean Cab. So we had a Cab and we had a Merlot, and in both wines actually worked very, very well with the burger. So I mean, we're just keeping it simple.
But what made that fun was both were different with the burger.
Oh,
but to
very.
your point, both were great with the burger.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I think Italy and vino with casual food, fucking everything.
Yeah.
I mean, Italians and French people, they do it right. Spanish too. I mean, if there's food on the table, you need wine. If you're ordering some food, you need wine.
Yeah. I mean, so if we're looking at creamy, whether it's a white pasta or we're looking at a little bit higher acid, kind of tomato based meaty pasta, the majority of the Italian wine selection is going to be higher acid. So if we're looking at Arnase, Pinot Grigio, Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, those 4 grapes that I just listed are, a little bit higher on the acid scale.
You can get down to Carcante.
Yeah, Caricante is gonna work with
Etna Rosso.
Yeah, Etna Bianco and a creamy white sauce.
Yeah.
Anything. Oh,
Yep.
I mean, a creamy white sauce pizza, and a Etna Bianco sounds delicious.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
I'm with you, buddy.
or I mean, or if you want to, kind of get some mushrooms involved, I mean, it just adds a little bit of meatiness to where that. Yeah, I think just balancing a white sauce and a mushroom just kind of adds some versatility to where you can kind of cross the whites and the reds with your dish. So yeah, I mean the options are just endless out there.
Well, that kind of gets us to, how to pair your wine confidently, right? Without being a sommelier or in the business, professional. And simply, we said it earlier on, it's not rocket science. You don't have to think specific wine. You have to think more characteristics of your food to match the characteristics of the wine that you want to have. And intensity, match the intensity of flavors.
Yeah.
Not just the flavors, but just the intensity of the wine or the intensity of the food. They need to marry up a little bit.
Well, I think you can do it on either side, whether you're starting on the food side saying, well, can I pair with this wine? Or, I don't know, you're at a wine gathering and you've got, it just happens to be that 3 friends all brought Pinot Noir. It's a grape that everybody's familiar with, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Gris. Anyway, it's just a handful of friends all brought Pinot Noir. Well, shit, guys, what do we order? What should we?
Yeah.
What do we want to order? What do we want to cook? And well, I think with a grape like Pinot Noir, your options are kind of endless. I mean, because you could do
Anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to work with some of the things that you pull off the barbecue pit. It's going to work with grilled chicken. It's going to work with
A filet that's not as fatty as ribeye, be fine.
Yes, but I think the pairing conversation can happen on either side of whether you're starting with the wine or starting with the food. And so it's important to not get stuck and be like, well, I want wine. And so somebody either starts with a bottle of wine in their hand or they start with a piece of food in their hand. And so I just think if you and I are sitting on the other end of this podcast offering people advice, we want to make sure that, look, it doesn't start or stop on one end or the other. We can fix this problem if you want to call it a problem.
And I would even say, if it's not a perfect pairing, it's still going to work.
Yeah, if you've got a good bottle of wine in your hand and a well-made sandwich, well-made burger, whatever it is in your other hand,
it's going to work. You don't have to overthink it.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a Carmenere and a chicken salad sandwich and you like them both, you're not going to be mad at yourself for drinking them.
But you bring up a good point about kind of the versatility of bottles, and I would say this: people who are listening to this that are into wine, where they're going, I like to drink wine, I like exploring wine. You probably have wine at home. Meaning you're keeping, whether it's a dozen bottles on hand or, like some of us, several hundred bottles on hand.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah. Versatility matters. In your wine collection, if you only have 12 bottles or even 6 bottles at home, have 3 or 4 that are versatile, meaning have a bubble, have a bigger red in that Cabernet type style, have a high acid red, whether it's a Sangiovese or a Pinot Noir. Have some different wines so that when you're going, man, I feel like cooking this tonight, you're not going, shit, I don't have a wine for that. I got to go to the store. You have a little versatility in your wine cellar. You know,
I guarantee
something.
you, if you happen to have, whether you're just the average person, you happen to have 12 bottles of wine in your collection, I guarantee you some of it's going to be Chardonnay, some of it's going to be Cabernet Sauvignon, some of it's going to be Sauvignon Blanc, and some of it's going to be Pinot Noir. Those are probably the 4 most commonly purchased 4 varietals. And they're honestly some of the most 4, I wouldn't call Cabernet Sauvignon one of the most versatile grapes on the planet. But it's going to go with a lot of the foods that Americans drink, whether that's barbecue or burgers or steak. Americans eat a lot of those foods that I just listed. So
sure,
you're going to be safe having some Cab Sauv in your wine chiller closet. And
we're not going to go down the rabbit hole now, but we will in a future episode where we talk about. Okay, you mentioned Sauvignon Blanc, like this Saint Brie, totally different than the Saint Brie than what you might get in Napa Valley. So my point in saying that is. Climate matters. Know where you're getting your wine from, not just the grape, but where it comes from. Cool climate versus warm climate, even though it's the same grape, is going to give you a different profile on that wine that's going to be different. I might go with this food, I want a cold climate Chardonnay. With this food, I want a little warmer climate Chardonnay. Yeah. So that matters. But again, going down a rabbit hole, we're not going to get down too far, but future episode.
For sure. I mean, so what's another American dish? I don't know. Where across America does meatloaf span? Meatloaf's a pretty, I'd say, especially when we're talking about red wine. Meatloaf's easy.
Yeah, but I don't think people who eat meatloaf drink wine. Sorry, Midwest people. I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Missouri. I go home to Missouri a couple times a year. And I'm working real hard to get my friends to enjoy wine.
You don't go to the Boston Market and get you a slice of meatloaf?
No, I've never been to a Boston Market one time in my life. And they used to be here in the Houston area.
Yeah, there used to be one up in the burbs of Houston. But
yeah.
All right. So what's another dish? What are we pairing next?
Well, I mean, what would you have give me something that you would go. I had this one time, and I didn't think there was a wine that would go with it, but I had this wine with this food, and it was like, holy shit, that works. Is there anything you can think of?
But before I come to a success story, I've got one more question.
Okay.
Chicken wings.
Okay. Spicy?
Let's go through the range. So we've got, just a dry rub, salt and pepper wing. Let's go lemon, pepper, garlic, and then let's finish with blazing hot. What wines are we going to use?
I don't know. I'll start with the blazing hot. I'm going to go a lot of sugar in a Riesling.
Yeah, got to go maybe even Moscato if you're
because you can get a teriyaki wing too. You might go something different with that. So
yeah, I think maybe a somewhere in the middle of the road for sugar level with Riesling. Maybe even dip your toe in Moscato if it's a real hot wing.
Yeah, and
then let's see, back it down to a lemon, pepper, garlic. Let's do Sauv Blanc. Maybe a Gruner, maybe even a Chardonnay.
Yeah.
For that lemon, pepper, and garlic.
You make me think of a pairing that I really enjoy, and I don't know why I'm thinking about this now, but I just want to mention it while I'm thinking about it. When I think about shell food, like oysters and things like that. I go to the Loire Valley and I go a Muscadet, where I go the Melon de Bourgogne grape, which is phenomenal. It's a Muscadet is what it's called. But, people hear Muscadet, don't confuse it with, Moscato that you get here in the States. It's not the same thing. But the salinity on that being near the ocean and the, brininess you get on the oysters, I mean, it's just a wonderful pairing. So I just wanted to throw that out there. There's just things that work together.
Yeah, and before we wrap up the chicken wing part here, we got to stop and say oysters and champagne, oysters and bubbles. Oysters and anything with salinity.
There's been a theme here that champagne goes with a whole lot of stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
But just a dry rub chicken wing, I'm going to say Malbec, Pinot Noir.
I was going to say a Zinfandel with a little spice on it.
Yeah, Zinfandel, Malbec, Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir would be good.
And then maybe even on the white side, of course, bubbles. We've said it enough times.
I might even do a Cab Franc, the right one with the spice.
For sure.
Rub.
Yeah, you've got a little bit of a sear on that wing. Mm-hmm. And then on the white side, we could finish with a Chardonnay.
Yeah.
I think, if you're just doing, salt and pepper with a little bit of a sear, I think a Chardonnay would play just fine. But yeah, I think that we've talked enough about, a lot of your grilled foods, a lot of versatility coming off the grill with wine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's wrap this up. Let's recap that wine is not just for fine dining. And the whole point of this is, I don't want to say we're on a mission, but we want to spread the word that more people need to drink and enjoy wine. I think, people in the profession, Travis, you as well, would, agree that the market shows that less and less people are drinking wine. The volume of wine being drunk is declining, not increasing. A positive might be that people are drinking better wine when they are drinking, so they're spending a little bit more to drink some better wine. But we want to get the word out that, wine, it is something that is meant to go with food, and we want that word to get out there because, I see these whiskey dinners. Hey, we're having a whiskey dinner. Whiskey at 100 proof, 120 proof, you're not supposed to take a bite and sip, and they don't work together. I mean, it's just, bullshit. But food and wine, they go together. They work well together. They should be enjoyed.
I could maybe do cocktails with in food pairings, but then we're talking about the other things involved in that cocktail than just the spirit that's making it pair. Whether it's a liqueur or a secondary spirit or I'm missing a word here, but the other thing a sugar or a bitter or something of those other things that's making it pair with that. That taco or that piece of brisket or that, salad or whatever it is that's, adding, fruit juice that's making it, pair with whatever it is you're eating. But Rob, you talk about the audience that's maybe declining in wine drinkers. And I think a big part of that is price, and I think people need to be just aware that, hey, look, if you go to, wherever it is that you buy wine, there's good wine, as low as $8. There's good wine as low as,
You're probably a little lower than me for $8.
Oh, okay. But I mean, all right, let's start at $12 or $14. So we're talking a bottle of wine that you're going to split. A group of 4 friends is going to get a full glass of wine.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're talking, I don't know, $14, $16, $20. You can get a good wine that's going to pair with some of these dishes that we've talked about. So I mean, whatever our socioeconomic climate ends to be doing, we there's a wine out there that's going to work.
Well, even to your point, that's a great point, because as we finish up and we wrap up this episode, a lot of people will go, well, I'm not going to go to a restaurant and pay $50 for a bottle of wine.
But you get a glass for $13.
No. Here's where I'm going. I'm going to have 4 beers at $9.50 instead. I'm going to have 3 cocktails at $22 instead, right? People do that all the time. Shit, I'm not paying $50 for a bottle of wine. I'll take that $18 cocktail and bring me another one, and bring me another one, and bring me another one, or a $12 glass of wine or a beer.
Or look at that wine list and split a $42 bottle 4 ways.
Well, then you could do 2, right?
Yeah.
2 bottles. But my point is, when you start thinking about the cost of wine for the volume you're going to get out of that bottle compared to a cocktail or glasses of beer that you're going to have, it's not that different. It's really not. And it's going to go way better with your food. I would say cocktails are better than whiskey or any kind of standalone spirit. But still, wine is king when it comes to, food and an alcoholic beverage complementing one another.
100%. I mean, my ideal, wine dinner would be start with something sparkling, move into a rosé, a white, and then finish with a medium to big-bodied red.
Yep. And then a dessert finish. I mean, let's just touch on that. A lot of people will think, hey, I'm going to have chocolate cake for dessert. Well, Cabernet Sauvignon does not go with chocolate cake. The rule of thumb you want to be mindful of is that any dessert you want to have, the wine that you have with that dessert needs to be much sweeter than the dessert itself. Just a rule of thumb.
Yeah, I mean, you might be looking. I mean, and people might joke at Moscato, but there's nothing wrong with a Moscato.
Yeah.
But
it comes down to quality. Is it well made? Is it imbalanced? Does it have good structure?
But I mean, at the end of the meal, you've got you've done episodes on digestif and aperitifs. You've got Moscato, Brichetto, Sauternes. I mean, there is options within the wine-ish world
For sure.
that work for, like, what do I want to finish this meal with? It's not a cocktail.
Yep.
There is things that, in the sub 18% alcohol world that I can finish off this meal with.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this podcast. The conversation was just to show you that and talk about that wine goes with everything. There's not a food you can name that a wine doesn't, you can't find a good wine to go with it where you're going to enjoy, or I should say it's going to enhance your enjoyment of the food and the wine. And that's the whole thing about wine and food pairings. They go together. Doesn't always have to be fancy.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple iTunes, whatever the platform is, if you've got a question, reach out to Rob and say, hey, look, what I'm having some crawfish. What do I pair this with? Reach out to Rob and say, hey.
Or tell us, what's your craziest wine pairing that you've enjoyed? You went, hey, I couldn't believe this went with this.
For sure. Instead of bringing that light lager, show up to that crawfish boil with something cool from, the wine shop, and, drop a comment and say, hey, look, I enjoyed this wine with, this spicy crawfish, and let us know how it went.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Travis, this has been a lot of fun, man.
Thanks, Rob, for having me on.
Always enjoy having you on, man. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Bottles and Bites Without Borders. And until our next episode, enjoy that next bite. Fun episode, Travis.
Good times. Thanks for having me on.